03:18 a.m., deep inside Russian airspace. On the radar screen of a Russian fighter jet, it isn't one target, but dozens of tiny blips appearing at once, separating, regrouping, then vanishing again. The pilot tightens his grip. These are not aircraft, not missiles. It's a Ukrainian drone swarm, cheap, low-flying, and designed to die. Missiles worth millions of dollars are armed under the wings. But where do you shoot when the sky itself seems alive? And what happens if every launch plays directly into the enemy's plan? The fighter moves to intercept. Then, this happened. By the time this interception unfolded, the air war over Eastern Europe had already entered a new phase. Since late 2023, Ukraine had increasingly relied on long-range drones and coordinated swarms to penetrate deep behind Russian lines, not to win air superiority, but to stress, expose, and exhaust Russia's air defense network. These were not classic air raids. They were tests of perception, reaction time, and cost. Russia, for its part, still possessed one of the world's most layered air defense systems. Surface-to-air missiles covered cities and bases, early warning radars watched the borders, and fighter jets stood on quick reaction alert. But that system had been built for a different problem: set bombers, cruise missiles, and manned aircraft flying predictable profiles. Drone swarms changed the equation. Most Ukrainian drones used in these operations were slow, low-flying, and small, often with radar cross-sections closer to birds than aircraft. Individually, they were easy to destroy. Collectively, they were dangerous. A swarm could force defenders to light up radars, burn expensive interceptors, or scramble fighters at short notice. Even when all drones were shot down, the defender still paid the price. Geography made the problem worse. Southern Russia and occupied territories offered long stretches of flat terrain, sparse radar coverage at very low altitude and multiple approach vectors. Drones could fly under radar horizons, pop up briefly to transmit data, then disappear again. Each detection triggered a dilemma: ignore it and risk a strike, or react and reveal your defenses. This is why Russian commanders increasingly turned to fighter jets as a flexible solution. A fast aircraft could visually identify targets, chase down drones that slipped past ground defenses, and respond where missile systems were saturated or poorly positioned. On paper, it made sense, but it also created a dangerous mismatch. A fighter jet is optimized for speed, range, and high-value targets. A drone swarm is optimized to be confusing, expendable, and persistent. When those two concepts collide, the question is no longer who controls the air, but who controls the decision-making loop. And on this night, that loop was about to be tested. Hours before the interception ever appeared on a Russian radar screen, the operation had already begun quietly far from the front lines. In a dimly lit workshop on Ukrainian-controlled territory, a small team worked in near silence. There were no uniformed pilots here, no polished hangars, just folding tables, laptops, soldering irons, and rows of drones that looked more like hobby aircraft than weapons of war. The swarm was not designed to survive, it was designed to force reactions. Each drone had a specific role. A first layer would fly predictable routes, emitting signatures meant to be detected, early decoys meant to draw attention. Behind them came reconnaissance drones flying lower and slower, transmitting brief bursts of data before dropping back under the radar horizon. A third group carried payloads, waiting for gaps that might open once Russian defenses responded. Intelligence feeding this plan did not come from a single source. Satellite imagery showed radar sites and air bases. Open-source flight tracking revealed common scramble patterns. Previous drone attacks had mapped response times down to the minute. The goal was not surprise, it was pattern exploitation. On the Russian side, the warning came abruptly. Ground-based radar operators flagged multiple low-speed contacts approaching from different bearings. None of them behaved like aircraft. Some faded in and out. Others appeared to split into clusters. The information was passed up the chain, and within minutes a decision was made. Scramble a fighter. The pilot had been on standby since midnight. When the order came, there was no dramatic speech, just coordinates, altitude bands, and a simple directive: intercept and identify. As the jet lifted off, the pilot already understood the challenge. Radar-guided missiles were poorly suited for targets this small. Cannon fire required visual contact, fuel was limited, time mattered. Back on the ground, Ukrainian operators watched telemetry scroll across their screens. As soon as the fighter's takeoff was detected, several drones adjusted course automatically. Others did nothing at all, continuing straight ahead like bait on a line. This was the moment the operation had been built around, because once a fighter jet commits to the intercept, it enters a space where speed becomes a liability. Sensors become overloaded, and every choice carries a cost. The swarm didn't need to defeat the jet. It only needed the jet to play its role. The fighter crossed the intercept line at high subsonic speed, climbing through thin cloud layers as the radar picture stabilized then destabilized again. Instead of a single track, the display showed multiple low-speed contacts scattered across a wide arc. Some moved steadily. Others hesitated, drifted, or vanished entirely. The fire control radar struggled to assign priority. This was not a dogfight, it was something unfamiliar. The pilot throttled back. Speed, usually an advantage, now worked against him. At several hundred knots, a drone moving at a fraction of that speed created awkward closure rates. Overshoot was a constant risk. Visual identification required descending into the same altitude band as the swarm, dangerously low for a high-performance jet. The first drone appeared almost by accident. A small silhouette crossed the canopy no larger than a bird engine buzzing faintly through the cockpit insulation. The pilot rolled and lined up the cannon. A short burst. The drone disintegrated, instantly, fragments tumbling into the dark. One kill. But the radar picture grew worse. As the jet maneuvered, new contacts appeared, not closer, wider. The swarm was spreading. Some drones climbed slightly, just enough to be seen, then dropped back down. Others flew straight and steady, daring the pilot to chase them. The fighter's radar, optimized for fast-moving targets, began to saturate with noise and intermittent returns. On the ground, Ukrainian operators watched the engagement unfold in delayed, fragmented data. They did not need a live video feed of the jet. The radar emissions alone told them enough. The fighter was maneuvering aggressively. Sensors were active, defensive systems were awake. That was the signal. Several drones abruptly changed behavior. The predictable decoys continued forward, drawing the jet away from the center of the swarm. Meanwhile, smaller groups slipped laterally, hugging terrain, exploiting the gaps created by the fighter's movement. From the pilot's perspective, the picture felt chaotic, targets appearing where he had just looked, disappearing where he expected them to be. He selected a missile, hesitated, then deselected it. Firing a radar-guided missile at a drone this small made little sense. Heat-seeking options were unreliable against weak thermal signatures. Every second spent chasing one target allowed others to pass. Then came the warning tone. Not a missile lock, but sensor overload. Multiple returns overlapped. The system attempted to correlate them, failed, and reset. For a brief moment, the sky went quiet. No clear targets, just uncertainty. The pilot climbed instinctively, trying to regain space and perspective. From below, several drones used the opening. One rose just enough to transmit a burst of data coordinates, radar activity, flight profile before dropping again. Another continued straight ahead, unchallenged. By now, fuel calculations were intruding on the pilot's thoughts. He could not stay here indefinitely. Each maneuver burned precious minutes. Each minute increased the chance that something would slip through, not because the jet had been defeated, but because it had been occupied. The interception was no longer about shooting drones down. It had become a battle over attention. And in that battle, the swarm did not need to win decisively. It only needed the fighter to stay exactly where it was. As the fighter circled, Russian air defense networks began to react. Ground controllers watching fragmented radar feeds could see what the pilot could not. The interception had stalled. The jet was still airborne, still maneuvering, but the swarm had not collapsed. Instead, contacts continued to flicker across multiple sectors, forcing a broader response. Surface-to-air missile batteries were brought to higher readiness. Short-range systems powered up first, their radars switching on in brief bursts to avoid prolonged exposure. Electronic warfare units followed, pushing noise into the spectrum in an attempt to sever control links. For a moment, several drones lost cohesion, drifting, wobbling, then crashing harmlessly into open ground. But others kept flying. The fighter pilot received new instructions: hold position, continue visual engagement. He acknowledged, though, the situation was becoming clearer by the second. The jet was doing exactly what the swarm needed it to do: stay visible, stay active, stay committed. Every radar sweep, every maneuver, every defensive emission was being observed, logged, and transmitted. Then the cost became apparent. Missile crews hesitated to fire. Each interceptor expended against a drone represented a poor exchange, but holding fire carried its own risks. Meanwhile, electronic warfare transmissions effective in the short term lit up positions that had remained quiet for months. The air defense network was protecting the airspace, but in doing so, it was revealing itself. From the Ukrainian side, this was the desired outcome. No dramatic explosion was required. No confirmed strike needed to be shown. The swarm had forced the defender to escalate across multiple layers, fighters, missiles, and electronic warfare against targets that were never meant to survive. As fuel levels dropped, the fighter was eventually ordered to disengage. The jet turned back toward base, leaving the lower airspace to ground defenses once more. Some drones were shot down afterward. Others vanished from the radar picture entirely. The interception was officially recorded as a success, but success depended on how you defined it. At first glance, the encounter looked lopsided. A modern fighter jet packed with sensors and weapons against drones that cost less than a single hour of flight time. Yet the outcome was never meant to be measured in kills. It was measured in decisions forced and resources consumed. The core limitation lay in sensor design. Fighter radars are optimized to track fast-moving, high-contrast targets at range. Small drones fly slowly, often close to ground clutter, with radar cross-sections that fluctuate constantly. When dozens of such targets appear at once, the radar's tracking logic struggles to maintain stable solutions. Contacts merge, split, or drop entirely, not because the radar is weak, but because it is being asked to do something it was never designed for. Speed. Usually the fighter's greatest strength became a disadvantage. High closure rates made it difficult to target long enough for cannon fire. Missiles, meanwhile, were inefficient. Radar-guided weapons risked losing lock. Infrared seekers had trouble discriminating weak heat signatures from background noise. Each engagement option carried uncertainty, delay, or excessive costs. The swarm exploited this imbalance deliberately. It did not rely on constant control or advanced artificial intelligence. Instead, it used simple behavioral rules: spread when threatened, cluster when ignored, climb briefly to transmit, then disappear. Some drones acted as decoys by design, broadcasting signatures meant to attract attention. Others remained quiet, conserving energy and avoiding detection until defenses were already committed elsewhere. Electronic warfare added another layer. Frequency hopping control links reduced the effectiveness of jamming. Short transmission bursts limited exposure. Even when individual drones were disrupted, the swarm as a whole continued to function. Losses were expected and irrelevant. From a systems perspective, the most important effect was not in the air but on the ground. Every radar activation, every electronic countermeasure, every scramble order fed valuable data back to the attackers. Response times, coverage gaps, and coordination friction were all revealed under real conditions. In essence, the swarm turned the defender's strength-layered responsive air defense into a source of vulnerability. The fighter jet did exactly what it was supposed to do, but by committing to the intercept, it became part of the problem the swarm was designed to create. The technology didn't overpower the fighter, it outpaced the logic behind it. In isolation, the interception changed little. No major base was destroyed. No aircraft was lost. Official statements could still frame the event as a successful defense, but in modern warfare, effects accumulate quietly, and this encounter added weight to a growing strategic shift. First, it reinforced a hard lesson for air defense planners: dominance in the air no longer depends solely on shooting things down. It depends on how cheaply an adversary can force you to respond. When a defender must scramble fighters, activate radars, and burn through electronic warfare cycles to counter expendable systems, the balance of initiative shifts, even if every drone is eventually destroyed. Second, it accelerated adaptation on both sides. For Russia, the encounter underscored the limits of relying on high-end platforms to solve low-end problems. Expect greater emphasis on dedicated counter-UAS layers, passive sensors, and cheaper interceptors designed specifically for swarms. For Ukraine, the result validated a strategy of persistence, repeated low-cost pressure that degrades confidence, reveals patterns, and stretches defenses over time. Beyond the immediate battlefield, the implications traveled fast. Militaries watching from afar took note. If a drone swarm could tie up a modern fighter inside one of the world's most defended airspaces, then no air defense architecture could assume immunity. The lesson applied equally to fixed infrastructure, expeditionary forces, and homeland defense. Most importantly, the encounter highlighted a shift in how air power creates advantage. It was no longer about decisive engagements alone. It was about forcing the opponent into unfavorable choices again and again until the system itself began to bend. The fighter pilot returned safely. The drones were mostly gone. Yet the airspace felt subtly different afterward. Less predictable, more contested, and increasingly shaped by actors willing to trade hardware for information. The sky had not changed ownership, but the rules governing it had. This interception was not a story of victory or defeat in the traditional sense. No burning wreckage marked the end of the encounter. No single moment decided the outcome. Instead, it revealed something more unsettling. The air domain is no longer dominated by whoever owns the fastest jets or the most advanced missiles. What unfolded was a contest between platform-centric thinking and system-level warfare. The fighter jet performed exactly as designed. The pilot made sound decisions under pressure. Yet the engagement favored the side willing to accept loss, exploit predictability, and think in terms of effects rather than survival. Drone swarms do not seek air superiority. They seek cognitive superiority, the ability to overload sensors, compress decision time, and force defenders into inefficient responses. In that environment, even the most capable aircraft can find itself reacting rather than controlling, spending resources to manage uncertainty instead of shaping the fight. For militaries around the world, the lesson is clear. Countering this threat will not come from one new weapon or sensor. It will require layered defenses designed from the outset to deal with mass ambiguity and attrition systems that are as comfortable losing cheap assets as they are protecting expensive ones. For the individuals involved, the pilot in the cockpit, the operators behind laptop screens, the experience underscored a shared reality of modern war. Decisions are made in seconds with incomplete information inside systems that were never meant to face this kind of pressure. The sky remains contested, not because technology has failed, but because warfare has changed faster than doctrine. And in that gap between expectation and reality, the next confrontation is already taking shape. Bye for now.